Welcome back to another episode of Press Play. I'm your host, Jeromee Scot. Today we're talking about a topic that's close to my heart. If you've ever agreed to do a morning show interview, you might think you know exactly what to expect. But trust me, in my experience, there are always a few surprises along the way. So today I'm breaking down the top 5 things that catch people off guard when they step into a studio for a morning show appearance. Whether you're a business owner, a nonprofit leader, or a PR professional prepping a client, this episode is going to help you walk in with confidence and avoid those deer in the headlight moments. We'll talk about everything from early call times to why interviews move so fast, and I'll share tips to make sure your next morning show appearance is a big success. We'll have all that and more coming up in this episode of Press Play.
Are you looking to get your business in the headlines without spending a fortune on a PR firm? Earned Media Essentials, a DIY guide for small business owners, is your step-by-step guide to securing media coverage, building credibility, and growing your brand, all on your own. Written by Emmy-winning journalist Jeromee Scot, this comprehensive resource teaches you how to craft compelling stories, pitch to the right journalists, and become a go-to expert in your community. Plus, you'll get 8 customizable downloads, including press releases, media pitches, and interview prep checklists. Everything you need to get started immediately. Download Earned Media Essentials now from the Scott Media Tulsa digital bookstore and start earning the media attention your business deserves. Visit scottmediatulsa.com to learn more. That's Scott with 1 T. scottmediatulsa.com.
Well, welcome back. We are here for Season 2, Episode 3 of Press Play. I'm your host, Jeromee Scot. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. I'm an Emmy award-winning journalist with over 20 years of experience in broadcast news. I've worked in corporate communications and media relations, and this podcast is where I share actionable advice to help you improve your PR, marketing, and communications strategies. I said in the intro that this was a topic that's near and dear to my heart. My career has been spent mostly producing morning shows. And so in today's episode, we're talking about the top 5 things that can surprise people the most when they agree to do a morning show interview. This came up recently in a conversation I had with a PR contact of mine. She told me that she had a client booked on a morning show, and one of these 5 things really caught him off guard. So these surprises aren't just limited, though, to first-timers. They can also catch seasoned pros off guard. So we're going to go through each of these 5, and I'm going to give you tips on how you can nail your morning show interview. So the first thing on the list is the call time. So you're doing a morning show, so they start very early in the morning. So your call time for a morning show interview might be as early as 4 or 5 a.m. Typically, it's going to be one of the later shows that could be a 6 or 7. For a lot of folks, though, that's still really early. So that's probably the number one thing that catches people off guard when they book a morning show interview is when they find out what time they have to get up, they have to be ready, and they have to be at the studio. If their interview is at 8 o'clock, sometimes they wonder why we ask them to be there at 7 or 6:45. Depending on the complexity of their segment, depending on how many people and our floor crew staffing, that can all determine what time we need to have you there. So my advice is to plan ahead. If you're not a morning person, set multiple alarms. You can lay out your clothes the night before. Make sure everything is ready to make your morning as stress-free as possible. And don't forget to bring coffee. Oftentimes people will come to stations thinking there'll be coffee because that makes total sense, but a lot of TV stations actually don't have coffee machines or coffee makers. And remember, if you're coming in for your interview at 5 or 6, the producers and the crew have been there probably for 4 hours before that. So they've already had their coffee. They came in at 2 a.m. So bring what you need. You'll be ready to go. So the second thing on the list is it surprises people that the interview is shorter than you expect. So it goes by very quickly. Most morning show segments are between 2 and 4 minutes. Sometimes they can go up to 5, but it's not a lot of time. So you do need to be concise. It's why I really stress the importance of media training. If you are a morning show guest and you have a PR firm or you have a PR representative, ask them to train you. Learn how to give really short answers to make your message consistent, but hit the key points. People are often surprised when the anchor wraps up just as they feel like they're getting warmed up. So the key to this is to rehearse your key points in advance, Think about one or two main takeaways that you want the audience to remember and then stick to them. Don't try to cram in too much. The anchor will help you. Sometimes you'll get a good anchor that will ask you questions very directly and short, and then that'll give you more time. Every now and then you'll get an anchor that kind of babbles on, and that eats into your time. But always remember, it goes a lot faster than you think. Rehearse. If someone says it's going to be 4 minutes, time yourself speaking for 4 minutes. You'll be shocked at how quickly that goes by. The number one downloaded podcast episode so far for this show has been the topic of why journalists will not provide you questions in advance. And that's the third thing that catches everyone off guard when they come in for an interview. Journalists usually get requests in advance for questions for the interview. And as journalists, they do not provide those in advance. They can give you topics, and they should give you topics. You should know what you're coming in to talk about specifically, but the journalist has to be flexible and have the ability to ask you whatever question they want. A lot of times politicians will demand questions in advance, and any good producer will then cancel the interview. And the reason why, especially in politics, is if someone asks for the questions a week out and then there's a big breaking news story that affects that politician the day before the interview, obviously the journalist has to be able to ask questions about that topic. And if you've boxed yourself into the interview and agreed to the questions in a week before, then that prohibits that. So questions will not come in advance. Again, that's the importance of media training and why you need to practice ahead of time. Make sure you know what you're talking about. And if you're not truly an expert in your field where you feel comfortable going on the news to talk about something, then you should probably not go. Fourth on the list is the studio environment itself. I had a friend from high school come on the morning show once years ago, and afterward he said he couldn't believe how bright the lights were, that there would be multiple cameras, that the cameras would be moving during the interview, and that the overall energy of a live set was a little bit overwhelming. When you add in producers who are talking and anchors earpieces, or potentially someone who's giving an anchor a hand signal to wrap or a 30-second, it can really feel a little bit chaotic. So my tip is to take a deep breath and focus on the anchor or the reporter who's interviewing you. Usually they're going to tell you ahead of time, ignore everything. Ignore the cameras. You're not going to look at the cameras. You're not going to look at the lights. You're not going to look into the distance. You're only going to look and talk to me. So block out everything else. Treat it like a one-on-one conversation. Also make sure you arrive early so you can get comfortable with the space before you go on the air. But also if you get there with 2 or 3 commercial breaks before your interview, the anchors will talk with you in commercial breaks before your interview to check in. How are you? How are you feeling? Do you need anything? Hey, I wanted to really focus on this topic. Are you okay if we talk about this? It gives you more time to feel comfortable and know what they're going to ask you about. Again, you're not going to get the questions, but they'll give you topics. If you're there early, that's how I always say, arrive early. The fifth thing that catches people off guard is you're going to be asked to provide visuals or props. So always be thinking of that. Many people don't realize how visual television is in general, but especially morning shows. So producers are going to expect guests to bring props, products, or visuals to help you illustrate your segment. Let's say you are going on a morning show as a cooking guest. You're going to need to bring the pots and pans that you need. You're going to need to bring all the food items pre-portioned and ready to go and ready for display. If you're talking about a book, bring the book. You'd be surprised at how many authors come on the show and don't bring anything. We want to show off the book. If you're promoting a product, bring it. If you are an exercise expert and you're coming in to show exercises or demonstrate wellness methods, you're going to want to bring jump ropes and armbands and weights and everything else to help make that visual. The audience wants to see what you're talking about, not just hear about it. Always ask the producer ahead of time if visuals are needed, and don't forget to make them camera ready. So this means no distracting logos or anything that reflects under the studio lights. By the way, the same goes with your clothing. I've seen a lot of people come with very busy clothing or a black and white pattern that usually doesn't look great on camera. So be thinking of that. Don't forget the visuals. That always catches people off guard. So there you have it. Those are just 5 things that surprise people. There's a lot more. I could get into this and talk about it all day. But to recap, number 1, the call time, seriously, very early. Make sure you're ready to go and don't be late. TV time is to the time. If they say 8 o'clock, they mean 8 o'clock. They don't mean 8:01. So make sure you're early. Number 2, the interview is going to fly by. Keep your points concise. Practice ahead of time. Number 3, you're not going to get the questions in advance. Just accept it. Practice being flexible. 4, the studio environment can be overwhelming, but focusing on the anchor can help. And then finally, bring visuals or props to enhance your segment. If you're preparing for a morning show interview, keep those tips in mind. You're going to feel a lot more confident walking into the studio, and you're going to do great on the air. If you found this episode helpful, I would love it if you shared it with a friend or a colleague who might be preparing for their own interview. Don't forget to subscribe to Press Play with Jeromee Scot so you never miss an episode. Also, I review my stats all the time, and I want to say hello to my new listener in Africa. Don't know where you are, I don't know who you are, but I appreciate that you're listening. Thank you for tuning in, and as always, keep showing up, stay prepared, and press play on your media potential. We'll see you next time.